Good evening, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're all doing very well tonight, and I am here bringing you some more Golgari mid-range, some more BG the Rock in the brand new Pioneer format. But I will tell you, right off the bat, straight out of the gates, this is not a full league. So why is that? Well, I played, the last time I had a chance to play a league, I'm recording this on Friday, was Monday of this week during the day. Got a league in with this list, or one very similar to it. I might have made one change, but this is the list I did review in my most recent video, so if you're curious as to why I'm playing the cards, link in the description below, you can check out that deck tech update. But, so the league that I played, that I'm going to show you parts of here, was a roller coaster of really cool gameplay and really not so cool gameplay. One of my wins that I will not show you and multiple losses that I will not show you just involved non-games, mulligans to oblivion, and or very feel-bad moments. We'll talk about it all at the end. We'll do a wrap-up where I touch on the missing matches and what happened there. But I've just been doing this long enough where I can recognize what's good content and what's not. So part of the reason I'm not doing a full upload of a full league here is because of that. And especially, you know, if a non-game happens while you're live recording, that feels a little bit more organic. But to go back and show you like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 non-games in replay form is just not good content. So instead of wasting your time with that, we are going to show you the good stuff. And it's not only the things that we won either. We're going to just show you the good in the interesting, in the useful, in the entertaining gameplay. The other reason I'm not showing you a full league is, of course, because later in the day after I played the league, Veil of Summer got banned, and Veil of Summer did play a role in a fair amount of the games that we're not going to see, so it's just a little bit outdated on top of being not great content in a vacuum. So that's why we're going to just look at maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 matches here. We'll see how it goes. I'll of course, at the end, do a wrap-up as well. So we are going to get straight into a league just as soon as we thank our newest Patreon supporters. So the first patron to thank is a returning patron. You know, some people have to dip out for a little while and then they come back. Some people have to leave Patreon altogether. Guys, never feel awkward about that. Never feel bad about it. I support I'm grateful, rather, for any level of support. So, but we love to see the returning patrons if they had to take a break. And Mike DiCamara has returned with a bang. He is back, and he is of the Veil, the very highest tier of support. Welcome back, Mike. Thank you so much, my friend. Truly appreciate your support. And we're also going to shout out the 3 patrons I shouted out on the Prowess video, because let's be honest, these guys are probably BGX players too, so we want to give them a BGX vid shout out. Corey West and Colin Haskins, 2 new Inquisitors, thank you so much, guys. And the Fjord, another of the the Veil tier supporter. Absolutely love it, my friends. I am so busy I cannot even tell you, but your support keeps me carving out time out of my day, keeps me coming back on a regular basis for you here. So thanks to all Patreon supporters, especially our newest ones. And without further ado, let's take this list through a little bit of what we did in our most recent league. Okay, my friends, round 1, game 1, and we've got to keep, it's really extremely dependent on drawing the 3rd land and the 4th land to make the hand good, but the curve is great. We've got a variety of angles of attack, we've got some interaction, and this is one reason I found myself on 25 lands, is because it's just so absolutely crucial to hit land number 4, at least on curve, and we can certainly put 5, 6, and even 7 to good use in the deck. One thing that you'll note is when you do have a hand like this, though, with no fetch land and, you know, kind of a low curve, Deathrite Shaman is kind of just a 1-2 when you play it on turn 1, but that's alright, we can still make use of that. Opponent goes Darksteel Citadel, pass, and we're pretty free to just get in with our Squire here, so we hit him for 1. And then it's ooze time, and we have drawn the 3rd land. That's a beautiful thing, so our hand is looking ready to at least function. Kind of hoping the opponent had some kind of a toughness 1 play, but instead it's another Darksteel into a Smuggler's Copter. So now what do? We've drawn another 3-drop. We could get Liliana of the Veil down, tick her up, and she's at least safe from getting killed by Smuggler's Copter. But instead, I mean, either way, we're shocking and we want to make a play this turn. Instead, I chose to play Courser of Krufik. So even though Courser doesn't block well against Smuggler's Copter, this looks like some kind of an artifact aggro deck. If they top deck one of their many haste threats along the ground, Courser blocks well against that. More importantly, it is going to dig us one card deeper toward land number 4, which we really want to see. And with another tracker on the top, our hand is starting to look really clunky, and we really need that. So that's why we play the Courser there. Get in with our underwhelming, for now, threats, and then pass back to the opponent. Opponent plays a Skilled Animator. 1/3 ETB makes another artifact, base power and toughness 5/5 for as long as Skilled Animator remains on the battlefield. So they're animating the copter, but then they're just passing. So the other advantage of playing an actual creature there as opposed to Liliana is we do have the aggro stance here. So back to us, we draw the tracker. We've got a Sign in Blood on top, so not particularly exciting at the moment, but taking care of Smuggler's Copter with Murderous Rider, that's kind of the premier target to hit anyway. We'd kind of probably want to hit that even if it wasn't animated by this, and leaving a 1/3 on the field is no big deal because we actually have good attacks into it. So for whatever reason, the opponent blocks the Deathrite Shaman and instead of the Skoos there, but so we get an extra point of damage across. Opponent then goes in Soul Artifact, targeting Darksteel Citadel, and makes another land drop, then they'll pass. Our Courser is paying off now because we get to play land number 4 off the top of the deck. And although we did have the ability to go tracker into land, that's definitely fine. I kind of like trying to control the board here a little bit more. So we're going to shrink the 5/5 with Liliana the Last Hope, and now we kind of have to pivot to the value game. We don't want to lean too heavily on just Tracker and Courser because they can race us pretty well through that if they start drawing really hot, but by playing Liliana we're kind of hedged, and we get to go Tracker next turn if we want as well. Opponent's got that main deck Phyrexian Revoker, that is some spice, and it's going to shut Liliana out of proceedings just for a moment. We get that Fabled Passage for turn, and then we're going to draw a Sign in Blood. So playing Sign in Blood, rather, takes us away from the tracker plan, but lets us draw that Fatal Push, and Fatal Push is definitely something that we're interested in right now. We have another Fatal Push on top of the deck. That's going to make for an interesting decision with respect to our Fabled Passage, but for now we're going to try to push Revoker, see if it resolves, and then we can at least start ticking Liliana up again, keeping in line with our plan from before. Opponent will go Shrapnel Blast. This is some nice value in response to removal, and they get to take care of Liliana, so that's a little bit rough, but they did have to tap their 5/5 in order to do so, which does free up, once again, some pretty good attacks for us. And the opponent is going to assign the block here, and now, even though Fatal Push is more than fine on the top, I did decide to fetch up a basic forest and eat before damage, because we, once again, are clearly the aggressor, and Fatal Push is not even all that exciting against their 1/3 that we need Revolt to hit, which we can do, but still not ideal, and of course this is indestructible, so I'm not too sad to shuffle that away, even though it's a fine card to draw. It's a fine hedge against other things. Opponent plays a Pia Nalar. It's a 2/2 that makes a Thopter when it ETBs, and it's a mana sink that has a fire breathing ability and an unblockable ability. So, a nice utility piece, a nice kind of mid-rangey card in the context of this deck. And we are just going to keep playing things out. Now we get the Tracker plus Courser Dream value. At this stage of the game, we can play Tracker without really slowing ourselves down too much. We are just increasing our inevitability. We will then try to trophy the Ensoul Artifact. Of course, we cannot, once again, hit this because it's indestructible, but we can set it back to its normal role of being a land, and then once again we have some okay attacks, some reasonable attacks at least, and we're just being generally proactive and pulling ahead on the board, so much so, in fact, that the opponent will scoop it up. So we didn't quite have them dead, but we were still at 19 life. There's no way they're coming back from this with only one card in hand. So here's an example of our Value Town stuff just taking us on the one-way trip to Value Town. Feels pretty good. We're against some kind of an artifact aggro deck. Let's take a quick look at how we side. Okay, so against this artifact aggro deck, we've got some... we look great post-side, if you ask me. I think we have enough to do where, like, it's not the worst idea in the world to maybe try to leverage exactly one Thoughtseize and or exactly one Sign in Blood, but maybe it's just one or the other. But in our case, we have so much to do that we can just side them all out, side out all the life loss, and side out one of our slower value pieces. I think Courser is pretty important to block along the ground here and gain life, so it would be either Nissa, Vastwood Seer, or the 4th tracker to come out to make the 7th cut. I chose to cut one tracker here. And in terms of what comes in, Fatal Push, yes. Infernal Reckoning, very good here. Collective Brutality, pretty nice. Grasp of Darkness, quite nice. Golgari Charm, definitely relevant. Both the Destroy Enchantment mode and the Sweeper mode, very good. And of course, Liliana and Kalitas are both excellent value engines here. There's a couple, like the value stuff here is not the worst, but I think Garruk and Vraska are better than Liliana and Nissa in this matchup. And then, Pithing Needle has some targets, for sure, but in this particular build, I don't think we need it unless we see something we're not prepared for. And similarly, Liliana's Triumph is fine. It's arguably any removal should be in. I could see this coming in. It's just a little bad against, like, if you think of Pia Nalar making a Thopter, it's a little underwhelming, things like this. So you could argue for either one of these cards, especially Triumph. I don't know what we would cut for it. Perhaps one Deathrite Shaman could make way. But in any case, these 7 in, these 7 out, it's a pretty clearly vast improvement. Let's check out Game 2. Okay, we are on the draw. We've got a pretty nice hand. Any functional hand with Fatal Push is looking pretty good here, but it's much more than that. It's got a nice low curve, some ability to scale into the mid game very well too. And the opponent has mulliganed down to 6. They're going to go turn 1 Ginger Brute. You got it. It's going to be back to us. We draw another Fatal Push. So this is actually kind of an interesting turn 1 decision. Number 1, we can play a land tapped. Nothing wrong with that. In some ways, it just saves life. Or we could shock in Overgrown Tomb and hold up Fatal Push. Nothing wrong with that either, but from what we've seen of their play patterns, kind of their highest value permanent on turn 2 is likely to be Smuggler's Copter, which of course will not be pushable the turn it comes down. So instead of either of those things, we're going to opt for Knight of the Ebon Legion, because it's a 1-2, and unless the opponent has nothing better to do with their mana, they might not be able to make Ginger Brute evasive. So this could theoretically block well and be better than Fatal Push. And sure enough, the opponent goes Copter, and we hold off the Brute. Feels good, man. Feels good. So once again, our Knight is protecting us, and we've got 2 Fatal Pushes that we're holding up. We've also drawn Kalitas, which is very, very nice, not going to lie. So opponent will crew the Copter, and beginning of combat is the ideal time to push the Copter because they have passed their main phase. They cannot decide after the fact that now they know their Copter is going to die to play another haste threat, but we're also, of course, not giving them the attack trigger. So Fatal Push resolves, that's very good. And then the opponent does make land drop number 3, and they're going to play Hope of Girapur, which is a 1/1 flyer that you can sack after it deals damage to turn off non-creature spells for a turn, and then another Ginger Brute. And they only have 1 card in hand. So I did on the end step decide to Fatal Push the Hope, and I think there are a whole lot of reasons not to. It's not the scariest threat in the world. However, we have a very clear curve of turn 3 Nissa to make our 4th land drop, turn 4 Kalitas, and then turn 5, maybe we could get extra value out of the Fatal Push, but I'm pretty happy to just be very mana efficient there and kill something. And we do have way more removal to draw to, and look at that, we immediately draw another form of removal, so I'm pretty happy to have pushed there. We also don't know if there's any kind of a weird synergy we're not aware of with Hope, so We know what the Ginger Brute does. We know we can handle that. We're just going to push the hope. And we get a nice bluff attack with Knight. Get to make him sweat it out if we're going to buff it, but we're not because we get to play Nissa. Nissa, again, guaranteeing that 4th land drop. Very nice. And also, once again, blocking the Ginger Brutes really well along the ground unless they have the free mana to make them evasive. So opponent is tapping out for Stone Coil Serpent. 3/3, reach, trample protection for multicolored. That's a reason to have saved our Fatal Push. Trophy can't answer it, so a little bit of a minor worry, but really not that bad anyway. We're just going to slam Kalitas this turn. We slam Kalitas, we say go, and if we get to untap, we're going to be in really good shape. With untap with Kalitas, that is. Opponent goes Hanger Back Walker, and then they're going to make Ginger Brute evasive, get in for a cheeky attack. Now, Hanger Back Walker is very, very good against us in general, but that's mainly because of its death trigger, and Kalitas is going to deny them that death trigger. So our hand's very good. We are just going to Brutality there. I thought about ditching the land to escalate and drain for 2, but I said, no, we have Nissa that we're looking to make land drops all the way up to 7 for. We've got Skoos, that's mana hungry, and we've got this line as well, of course. Shocking in the Tomb, and Shocking in the Tomb then moving to attacks gives us excellent attacks, because we can pump the Knight, or we can sack a zombie to pump Kalitas at instant speed here, so really putting the opponent on the back foot here. And they make a pretty fateful block here. I don't think they're supposed to block like this because we just get to devour our zombie, crush them. We become a 5/6 lifelink. We 2-for-1 them, and we go back up to 19 and look at the board state. We even have card advantage. We've got the mana sinks. We've got the inevitability. Opponent either was... maybe they felt so far behind that they had to make us see that line. And just hope we didn't see it, and that's how they get rid of Kalitas. Maybe they just think they can't beat Kalitas no matter what, so they're just going to try to block him, and if it doesn't work, they scoop. Either that, or they just misplayed, and once they realized their error, they scooped. It's hard to say, but either way, my friends, that was a heck of a display from our deck. We are pretty nicely positioned, I would say, against these types of artifact aggro decks, despite, if you look back at our list, despite how value-oriented we are with Nissas and Trackers and Coursers and all these Planeswalkers and stuff, we still have the ability to really crush these aggro decks, no problem. So that's what we saw here in this first round. Feels pretty good. Nice display from the deck. Let's go on to round 2. Okay, my friends, here we are for round 2, and we've got a 1-lander with our 6-drop in it, so pretty clear mulligan. We do have some low-curve stuff to do, but especially when the 1-land's going to get a swamp, we're going to be off of green, and we pretty clearly had to mull that. This is a slow but reasonably powered 6. It functions, and both of the spells in our hand are 2-for-1s, so we'll see how it goes for us. And look at that, we are against another Ginger Brute deck. So obviously we want to draw some low curve stuff. Instead we draw another Tireless Tracker, so the slow things are not ideal. And the opponent is curving out here with triple 1-drops and starting to accrue Bomat Courier value. Really want to draw some low curve interaction, and we hit a land. So not the greatest here. And the opponent is once again just going wide, Ornithopter this time, hitting us, and then no play. So a couple options here are that they are holding up some kind of effect, or that they have like 3 drops in hand and didn't hit the 3rd land drop. Hard to say. So we're again hoping to draw low curve interaction. Again, we only draw land. So here we could play Murderous Rider along the ground. I don't think that's particularly correct here because the only thing it blocks, if the opponent wants to make the other things evasive, is Bomat Courier, which of course is the thing that they can sack for value anyway. If they find in Soul Artifact or something to put on the Ornithopter, Rider along the ground is not enough, so instead we risk them having permission here basically by passing with Swift End Up. But if we had played Rider out, we risk them having removal for it. So it's kind of pick your poison. I do think this is the correct play, but as you're about to see, it's not going to work out very well for us. I'm a little bit more encouraged because the opponent does tap out a bit for a Smuggler's Copter, but they've got the action, they've got the interaction, they've got a Metallic Rebuke, pretty tough stuff. So Swift End gets countered, they still come across for 3. Bomat, Courier, Cruise Advantage, we draw Thoughtseize. That's pretty poorly timed, not gonna lie. We could go Tracker, Double Clue, Thoughtseize to get the last card out of their hand, but then we're down to 8. We're going to be taking 3, 4, 5 next turn minimum. Plus they can refuel with Courier, so I don't know how good Thoughtseize is anyway. So instead of that, I decide to just roll out the Vraska. We're obviously going to lose her, but taking care of Copter is going to buy us the most time. It's going to reduce their best clock, their best filter, and it's going to at least gain us at least 1 life if they have to attack her. Sadly, the opponent has a skilled animator, so they're going to make that Ornithopter a 5/5. Then they get to have awesome attacks. Put us down to 3, take care of Vraska. We draw another Thoughtseize. So look, when we needed to draw low curve stuff along the ground or kill spells, we draw lands and Tracker, and then Thoughtseize is not particularly good. So we are just dead, but we'll Thoughtseize for a little bit more information. And we see Ghostfire Blade, which is basically a +2/+2 equip 1 in context of this deck. And there we go, we just got beat, so that will do it. Yeah, got run over, had kind of the game 1 problem here of, especially after having taken a mulligan, just kind of keeping a functional hand, hoping it lines up, and also being on the draw. All of those 3 things conspired against us. We're on the draw, we took a mull to 6, and our hand was too slow to deal with that curve out. If they didn't have a Metallic Rebuke, if they didn't have interaction on top of it, might have been a different story, but as it was, we got pretty good. So you just saw me sideboard against the, I guess, the more red-oriented version of this deck. I'm still far from an expert on Pioneer. I haven't been able to play that much. But what I did do is say, okay, against this, more counter-based deck, I could see the games going longer, and therefore I also tried Pithing Needle. I mentioned Pithing Needle and Liliana's Triumph were 2 cards I was potentially interested in, but ended up not doing in round 1. Here we brought in a Pithing Needle, so we'll see how that plays out. Let's go over to game 2. Okay, so we are on the play here for game 2, and it's a hand with that Pithing Needle, and it's a good hand. We've got 2 pieces of early interaction, we've got lands, we've got a hate piece, and we have Deathrite Shaman as well. This Bile Blight now in my list is Grasp of Darkness for reasons I will get into during the wrap-up, but again, I played this league before the changes, before I made my update video, my deck tech update, so Bile Blight it is, and hey, Bile Blight's awesome in this matchup. I think we definitely want to just get the Quagmire down there on turn 1. No real need to play Deathrite Shaman out, especially with our mana otherwise being very awkward. So we draw Liliana the Last Hope, so we are extremely rewarded for that sequencing, because now we're guaranteeing that we can play Liliana next turn if we want to, and if we had not done that, we couldn't. So they go Smuggler's Copter, Deathrite holds off Ginger Brute, which is a beautiful thing, and then we get to play the Liliana, and this is the perfect window to do so, because she gets to take up, get a kill, which is always amazing, and even if they have a creature to follow up that crews the Copter, it doesn't quite kill her on the crackback. However, in Soul Artifact sure does. I also left Deathrite back to block in case they had like double creatures and one of them being haste, but they're just going well over the top of us with Soul Artifact on the Smuggler's Copter, so that's a little bit rough. Oops, I shouldn't have skipped past that part because that was actually a pretty cool thing. I'll explain it now. So the Copter attacked, the Copter looted away a land. That actually opened up the line for us, also because we left the Deathrite Shaman untapped, to exile their land and make a black mana and then try to push the Copter, which would have been awesome. That was not a line that was available to us before they looted away the land. However, opponent had Stubborn Denial, so their permission really crushing us so far in this in this match, but they are down to one card in hand, and we have drawn Golgari Charm, which does deal with Ensoul Artifact. So it's not as good as it's not a 2-for-1 like Fatal Push would have been, but we still get to answer that. And then we actually get to play Pithing Needle on the Copter, which is pretty good here. That's probably the main card I have it in for, plus, again, as I mentioned, other things that we might not be prepared for. We hold up Deathrite because the activations are more powerful, of course, than the attacks. Opponent plays a Hope and will pass, and then on the end step, we are going to start draining. I think when the life totals are this high, even though they're an aggro deck, I think it's better to drain with Deathrite Shaman. Partially because the drains really add up, and partially because, like, nothing else in either deck is going to use instants and sorceries for much of anything out of the graveyard. But if we draw Scavenging Ooze, we want to have targets in there to grow the Skoos and gain life, right? So, all else being equal, I like draining with DRS. And here I did choose to sandbag the Woodland Cemetery because we have Collective Brutality in the deck, and we also have 3 trackers still in the deck. So, Woodland Cemetery is staying in the hand. We're going to, the opponent plays a Ghost Fireblade, and then they're going to try to equip it. In response, we're going to try to Bile-Blight the Hope. And as it turns out, the very last card in their hand is Metallic Rebuke. So the funny thing is, I was actually even thinking that we were not in danger of getting rebuked. But the fact that they played Ghost Fireblade first means that they had Improvise. So it all came together to really punish us there. And maybe it was just wrong to not play this land. I can accept that. But again, we did have at least some incentives to hold it back. Definitely got max punished for it, though. And you know, at the end of the day, I was kind of just trying to be mana efficient. Like, it is not mission critical to Bile-Blight the Hope of Girapur. We did still trade 1-for-1 with one of their spells. It's really not that big a deal, but a little bit of a getting punished moment for sure. We're going to top deck a Nissa Vastwood Seer. And I guess which was another reason where it would have been nice to play out the land, right? Because we'd be a little bit closer to flipping her. But think we have more incentives to hold the land than to play it overall. In any case, back to the opponent. They're smacking us for 3. And the last card in their hand, their top deck for the turn was a Stone Coil Serpent. So hey, the opponent curving out really well. Couple of nice pieces of permission, right on curve, right at the right times. And they're top decking now that they're out of gas pretty well as well. We're going to keep going on the drain plan. We've drained them for like 6 by now, maybe 8, something like this. Pretty good stuff. And then speaking of good top decks, we're going to go ahead and top deck the Bomb. Top deck the Kalitas. You've got to love it. So Kalitas, very nice here. Threatening to run away with the game if we get some support for him in the form of kill spells, and also blocking Stone Coil Serpent very well at the moment, which is definitely big game. Opponent finds a Ginger Brute, which, hey, you know, that plays. So they've got some evasion here coming across for 4. Smuggler's Copter is still needled out of the game, and Deathrite Shaman drains them yet again. Deathrite really putting the clock on here. Cute play from the opponent's second main, swapping Ghost Fireblade over to Stone Coil Serpent. It's going to make our attacks back a lot worse, but unless we draw something good. So we draw Courser of Krufix, and the first thought here is that, okay, another slow, medium-sized value piece is not exactly what we need, is it? But, of course, we're going to go ahead and play it, and as it happens, Courser is going to show us a land off the top of the deck. And that's actually going to start off a pretty incredible sequence of events. So we get to play the land, which is card advantage, and we get to flip Nissa because that's land number 7, and we get to gain a life, very good in an aggro matchup, and we know that there's a Fatal Push on the top of the deck. So flipped Nissa, you can tick down to make a 4/4 legendary elemental, or you can tick up to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, it goes to the field, otherwise it goes to your hand, and hey, you know what's pretty good right now is that Fatal Push right on top. So we get the Fatal Push. We've, we had a draw step of Courser. Courser's card advantage gave us a land. The land gave us the Nissa. Nissa's card advantage gave us the Fatal Push. Fatal Push gets to cleanly answer their biggest threat. And we also have enough mana to make Kalidas gigantic, which is very good for the purposes of lifelinking this turn and clocking the opponent and getting up out of the range of some burn spells that they might have, because they are showing us a lot of red here, even though they haven't really played red non-creature spells yet. And that's just too big of a swing for the opponent to come back from, so they take their draw step and then they just scoop it up. So what a turn. What a turn 8 that was for us. We got a decent board, but it's kind of iffy. It could go either way. And then we go Courser into free land, into Flip the Nissa, into free spell off the top, Fatal Push your best thing, grow the Kalidas, hit you for 5 lifelink, 6 total. Pretty awesome stuff. And that was an example of the value really turning the corner out of nowhere. You've got to love that. We had some good interaction as well. Liliana on curve, they had to have some pretty specific things to answer her on curve, which they did. They had to have some good permission at various points alongside their aggressive curve out, which they did. So the opponent's curve out was very good here again, but this time we took them down. So that was one of the feel-good moments of the league. No question about it. Good stuff. Let's go to Game 3. Okay, my friends, Game 3, Round 2, and we've got a keeper. We've got 2 pieces of flexible removal. We've got 3 lands, and we've got the Scoos to stabilize and the Tracker to carry us through the mid-game. So it's a good hand. The opponent will also keep 7, and this turn 1 Ginger Brute is is starting to look mighty familiar. We draw another ETB tapped land. I think getting the Scry early is better than getting Quagmire down in this case. And we get to bottom another land that we don't need, so that was good value. Back to the OP. The turn 2 Smuggler's Copter also starting to look rather familiar. So it's back to us. We draw another Scoos. Good card in the matchup. Not really what we want to see, but if they happen to deal with our first one, we'll be happy to have it, I suppose. But we, of course, just want to kind of keep drawing interaction. Back to the opponent. They will go Ginger Brute number 2, crew the Copter, and we're going to decay the Copter. Definitely decay. They're playing around counter magic, not ramping the opponent. All that good stuff. And they hit us for 1, and they don't have a third land, so it is back to us. And definitely an interesting decision here, whether we want to shock in and play the Nissa, or whether we want to just play a Scoos and play a tap land. I do think playing Scoos is ultimately better here, even though it doesn't have things to eat yet. It's still a good removal target for the opponent. We kind of wanted them to have removal there almost, to remove the first Scoos, then we get to follow up with a second one at some point. But in the meantime, it does block Ginger Brutes just as well as Nissa does. And back to the opponent. Doesn't block that Ginger Brute. They got Ensoul Artifact on 1. And they're not giving the other evasion, which is obviously a signal that they've got something else to do. It's almost worth considering the chump block right away, because they could have evasion in subsequent turns. But we were at 17, so I said, our hand is clunky enough. I probably shouldn't throw away a Scoos quite yet, but I am interested in maybe a chump block next turn. We draw land. So, couple options here. We could, go Tracker into land, and it would probably have to be Overgrown Tomb because we're never going to be able to afford the shock. Or we could just play Nissa and draw land, thin out our deck a little bit. But realistically speaking, we need to deal with this Ginger Brute or we're probably not going to win. So we're just going to go ahead and trophy here. We are not in danger of getting Metallic Rebuked because they don't have the mana to improvise, to pay for it even with improvise. So we are forcing them to have exactly Stubborn Denial, and that's unfortunately exactly what they have. So pretty rough stuff, and all we can do now is pass, probably getting ready to chump block here if they allow us to. So back to the opponent. They will get the Ginger Brute there, and they're coming across evasive. Smuggler's Copter. Okay, I guess I chose not to chump block here. I don't know. Maybe that was a punt. Maybe I have to just chump block there. But I guess we're still holding out hope that we can draw some interaction. And we are just dead on board because we did not draw interaction. So, I don't really remember not blocking, but apparently I didn't. You know, the replay has been known to be wonky before, but I don't think it's probably wonky in this case. So, bluffing Fatal Push is just about as good as bluffing anything else, like bluffing Decay. So, we might as well just put our stuff out and make them see the right attack. But of course, they're going to go for the attack, and that's going to do it. So, I guess we really had to chump block last turn with the Scoos. The fact that we didn't means that we were dead on board here no matter what, unless we drew interaction, which we did not. Having said that, if we chump block last turn, we don't have the Scoos this turn. We have to take kind of a different turn the following turn, and we are dead unless we draw interaction anyway. So maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it was the wrong play. Really thought from memory, I thought I did chump, but in any case, we got curved out on. But really, where the game was lost was with this Stubborn Denial. We forced them to have exactly that. The limitations of Trophy are kind of apparent in this format relative to Decay. I think that's a big takeaway here because, of course, they were stuck on 2 and then eventually the 3rd land through the first 6 turns, so ramping them is not ideal, ever. And also, unable to be countered is definitely more relevant than it first looked like it would be in this format. There's not that much like great counter magic in the format, right? But in a deck like this, the permission can really shine. Now, I will say this. I think that if anything, the permission variant of this artifact aggro deck is probably a little bit easier for us to beat, all else being equal, than like a more all-in aggro deck. The reason I say that is because traditionally the tempo-oriented permission cards in the tempo-oriented decks, they give them a higher density of bad top decks, of dead top decks when we do pull ahead. And our card quality is so much higher than theirs if we can get our feet underneath us and slow their roll and stabilize a bit. This was a tough league in that regard in some cases. This was a little bit of we drew 2 pieces of interaction. That's not enough. That's not enough when they're on the play and when one of them gets countered. So we just really needed to draw more interaction. Maybe I needed to chump block here, but in any case, we're kind of priced into drawing pushes and decays right away, like 1 for turn, 1 off clue to have a chance. And even then, Ginger Brute could still finish us off perhaps. And they've got 3, going to be 4 cards in hand. Definitely a little tough to see us getting there. We just needed to draw more removal. Didn't happen. So the game one was rough. We kind of gave them a free win because our hand was so slow. We had an epic win in game 2, one of the coolest moments of this league, and then kind of didn't really get going here again in game 3. I think we've got enough removal. You just have to draw it, and we didn't have it this time. Alright guys, round 3, and we've got a double Thoughtseize hand in a blind game 1, so unless the hand is totally non-functional, to me that's usually a keep. This is just our premier interaction in the format. Obviously we really need to hit some lands, especially with a 6-mana Garruk in the opening hand. That's a little bit awkward, right? But the opponent will mulligan to 6, which is good news for our Thoughtseize related plans, and we see a double Supreme Verdict hand that also has Emery, Lurker of the Lock, and Attune with Ether, but only 2 lands, and one of them at least cannot produce white. So I think if we take 1 Supreme Verdict, we kind of have to price ourselves into taking both. I chose the opposite route. I said we're just going to try to battle through the verdicts, hopefully only utilizing 1 thing per turn, and instead we're going to take Attune with Ether and hope they don't draw lands. But right away, they draw another land. Not only a land, but a value-oriented one, giving them the Scry. Pretty rough. And we have not, on the other hand, hit our lands. So I'm going to run out the Deathrite Shaman because it's at least going to give us something proactive to do. I still think we kind of need to commit to our initial plan, which is not taking the Thoughtseizes. Therefore, we take Emery away and send it back to the opponent. The opponent immediately draws another land, so our line has been pretty punished. We would have been better off probably taking, even though I don't think it's philosophically correct on turn 1, Might have been better to take one Emery and one Verdict, at least with how it played out. But in any case, back to us, we draw. We do hit our third land on curve, and we see a fourth land on top, so we're just going to go ahead and leave that there. We need all the lands we can get. Going Tracker into land is going to open us up to a sweeper, but it's still probably going to be the right play. Opponent goes Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, and now it is confirmed that the opponent is playing Aetherworks Marvel. To me, at least, that was not immediately clear. Again, I haven't played Pioneer an enormous amount, but the lists I have seen have had very different early plays than what we saw with things like Attune, Emery, Supreme Verdict. But we go ahead and play the Tracker, make our clue, so it's not strictly going to be a 2-for-1 when we get Verdicted here. We're going to gain a little life and attack their graveyard by eating the Emery in response. That can matter with things like a hard-casted Emrakul, but it's probably not terribly relevant. So we hit a fifth land, which is great. It must be said that despite missing our land drop on the first turn, we have hit lands every single turn, which is basically just what we want to do with this Garruk in hand. So we're going to play out the Skoos. Again, attacking their graveyard is totally fine. And the opponent has drawn Attune with Ether, so they get to have a nice turn of ramping and then verdicting again. And of course, Ooze is going to draw out the Verdict, so that's a fine thing. We'll again eat in response, but I rate playing Garruk on curve more highly than just taking care of these Attune with Ethers. So we spend 1 mana eating, and we spend 2 mana drawing. We also draw Assassin's Trophy, which is all fine and well in this matchup. Could be pretty good, especially now that they've already curved out with their lands. But for now, it's Garruk time. Jamming the Garruk, making some wolves. I love this guy. He's just so cool. He really is so cool. So back to the opponent. They find another Puzzle Knot. Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot should be in every list. This one I have not seen as commonly, but it's still good. It's another source of value and energy, which is what their deck wants, and that's exactly what they get. So they've got one unknown in hand as they pass it back over to us. And now the client's starting to slow down just a tad, but we draw a good old Questing Beast, so we're just going as wide as possible. We are making wolves first and foremost, and then we jam the QB. It's a really nice turn because at this point we just want to clock as quickly as possible. We are holding up Trophy. Definitely no need to spend it right now. We are not even that soft to another Verdict, even though we want to fade one because we just get to keep rebuilding with Garruk. So the opponent will hit the Puzzle Knot, scrying to take in their turn. I believe they went bot with both scries, but we don't have the log right now. But they've got another Puzzle Knot as well, and we definitely want to save the Trophy for a different payoff. Not all of them will be able to be trophied. For instance, Emrakul will not, but still, it's definitely correct to hold the Trophy there. Garruk is doing his thing, making more wolves. We attack. We've got the opponent nearly dead here, but not quite, especially because they've got the Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot on the field, and they get to gain 3 life. They've got all the energy they're ever going to need, right? But then we get to play the Vraska second main phase, take care of the Puzzle Knot while they're tapped out so they cannot sack it in response, and we get to hold up Trophy. So guys, our curve out has been pretty awesome, in light of the fact that it was kind of a bad opening hand and a sketchy looking opening curve. It's all come together really well for us here in the mid to late game. So opponent finally top decks the namesake card of their deck, which is Aetherworks Marvel. They're going to go ahead and activate it, and they marvel into another marvel, which is not really what they want to do, but it does keep the chain going. So they get 2 more energy, they activate again, and they marvel into another marvel. Now, this is a really nifty little line. Remember how I said they have all the energy they're ever going to need? Well, that's not technically true in respect to this exact circumstance. So they're on their way to getting energy counters number 5 and 6 after having already spent 12. But those are triggered abilities. They go on the stack. So in response to them, we are actually able to trophy this Aetherworks Marvel, which is going to deny them another flip, another crack at hitting whatever their terrifying payoff in the deck. I'm sure there are multiples, might be. And the opponent scoops to that, so that's a really nice window of opportunity. That's exactly why we hold up trophy in a matchup like this. Not only can it answer the payoff, but in strange circumstances like this, despite the fact that they began the turn with an absolute ton of energy, more than you really see them ever having at any one time in a typical game, we were able to trophy while they were out of energy, while they didn't quite have enough yet to activate. So what an unusual way to win. We have to decide whether or not to take away the verdicts. We decide not to. We get pretty significantly punished for that because the opponent just immediately hits the lands that they need and their scry lands, so they get the value along the way. And then we're like not even starting to build a board that survives until we play Garruk, making a couple wolves on turn 6. But a few more activations later, the top deck of the QB, Vraska coming down to help keep their puzzle knots clear, and then trophy at the opportune time. Once this stuff gets rolling, Questing Beast and Garruk, it's a little slow to get going, but once it does, it's a pretty decent clock. So we ended up getting there, turning the corner really quickly. This was a high note of the league. This was a cool, kind of unorthodox way to get there against Aetherworks Marvel. Alright, my friends, so I sideboarded relatively conservatively and potentially incorrectly in this matchup, but this is kind of an example of the format being new, my inexperience, and also the tension between sideboarding against what you've seen versus what you think might be in the deck. So if we were sideboarding against what we've seen, we might shave a little bit more heavily on fatal pushes, but the lists that I've faced in the past have creature-based ramp, and also things like Rogue Refiner, which can be problematic blockers that also make energy and all that stuff. So I decided to leave in, like 3 decay and 2 push. Decay also can tag the puzzle knots if they're tapped out. It's not ideal, but again, the times that I've played Marvel up until now, these cards have been ones that I've wanted to retain some access to. And I'm not all that excited about a whole lot of what's going on in the sideboard, but so we trim a push, we trim a decay, we trim a Deathrite Shaman. The clock is okay, attacking their graveyard for Delirium is okay, but definitely not at its very best in this matchup. Once again, we're just trimming a tracker because it's a little slow, and with all due respect to Garruk and his wolves, I think that is better replaced as a clock by Nissa Vital Force, and you know what, actually, the thing to mention about Garruk here, though, is that isn't out to resolved Emrakul, so I did want to say this is potentially one that comes out, but I do want to draw your attention to that. And again, it's a matter of sideboarding against what you've seen. We didn't see Emrakul there, so I don't know. When you're in Blind Game 2 and when the builds are still varying at this... I said Blind Game 2. It's not strictly a Blind Game 2, of course, but in terms of what their payoffs are, it's a little bit blind. So Garruk, you could take or leave, but in any case, if you're not worried about having to destroy something with protection from instants, you could probably cut him. Liliana's Triumph is an out to Emrakul. It's also an out to everything from the smaller stuff to different creature-based payoffs from Aetherworks Marvel. Cage and Pithing Needle are hate pieces for the namesake card, and even though this is a combo deck, I did not bring in Lost Legacy because presumably they have multiple payoffs that can beat us. Exiling any one of them is not anything close to a guaranteed win and could end up being card disadvantage and or kind of not the most relevant play. If you could name artifacts, of course, this would be a whole different story. I don't know. Maybe you're still supposed to bring this in. Maybe it's still good enough. Maybe it's going to make their hits off Marvel a lot worse. Who knows? Maybe some of you know. I do not. So I decided to sideboard a little bit conservatively. And if you wanted to be extra conservative, you can even leave the Garruk in. Because again, his wolves can get us there if we take the game long, and he can destroy some of the resolved payoffs and all that good stuff. But When we're not entirely sure, we stick to the plan, we stick to the core, and we go to game 2 relatively conservatively sided. Okay, guys, so this hand's a functional one. It's got, if they are on the earlier plays, the creatures playing to the board to try to ramp them, we have answers to that. It's a Thoughtseize hand. But this league was rife with me having to either keep 2 landers and hope I draw my lands on curve, or actually having to mulligan a lot of 1-landers, which is very strange for a 25-land deck. It was just a league where variance was all over the place, which is one of the reasons I don't think it's worth showing you the league in its entirety. But the turn 1 Thoughtseize is big game. We see that the opponent has a 3-lander, and it's kind of a scary one. They got double Puzzle Knot and Emery. Emery's a good one, and they also have an Ugin for payoff. So, a little bit scary. I do just take a Puzzle Knot, kind of the equivalent of taking the value in this context. And they do go turn 2 Puzzle Knot. Nothing we can do about that, but at least they only had one. And at least we're drawing our 3rd land on curve. And our 4th land, we've got a Castle Lochthwain on the top. That one's going to enter the battlefield tapped, but we still got to top it. We still need all the lands we can get. And Lochthwain is a good land in this matchup, theoretically. So Emery will mill some lands and a Verdict, and they play a Temple of Mystery. So thankfully we are just able to decay the Emery before it can buy back the Puzzle Knot and who knows what else. We get the Quagmire down, we pass back. Opponent finds Aetherworks Marvel on turn 4, but they only have 3 energy. They cannot activate it, and that is one reason we took the initial Puzzle Knot. But we don't have much of a window to do so, so we've got to do something about this turn, and we draw Thoughtseize. What a draw. What a great, great draw. So we're going to lead off with that, see exactly what the opponent's up to, and the opponent has another Marvel in hand. So they found 2 Marvels in the last couple turns. Definitely would have been very tilting to trophy the first one, then they just have another one. But as it is, we get to trophy that, and Thoughtseize the other one away, leaving them admittedly with an Ugin that we just ramped them toward, and we don't have a board state. We haven't started clocking them yet. They're at 23. So it's still definitely a little bit sketchy, but they could very easily just Marvel into an Ugin anyway, so we might as well make them try to hardcast it. They don't hit a land drop. That's good news. It's back to us. And we could either play Tracker or Skoos. I did decide to play Skoos because, number 1, attacking their graveyard could be good. Number 2, there are 2 creatures in their yard, so Skoos is actually a more credible threat after a couple activations than a Tracker with no lands to follow up is. And number 3, we of course want the Tracker value. Even in a kind of a race matchup, we still don't want to throw that away for no reason. So all those things are incentives to play Skoos over Tracker, even though it's a little less mana efficient. And then they got a Supreme Verdict, so we'll just eat a couple things in response. Then the Ooze will bite the dust, and unfortunately we miss a land drop yet again. So at this point I decide we're just going to try to race, playing 2 things out, risking running into another Verdict, and wouldn't you know it, they found another one. So just like they found 2 Marvels kind of back-to-back over a couple turns, now they found 2 Verdicts back-to-back. And extra tilt factor, we draw the follow-up land for Tracker right after we lose her. So not much we can do besides play it, and either attack with Quagmire or activate Castle. I opted to activate Castle because a 13-turn clock just does not seem good enough. We've got to find more Thoughtseizes to answer Ugin, or we've got to find a better clock. So Castle Lochthwain, perhaps the first of many activations. We find Vraska, not very good right now, and we find a land, not very good right now. So definitely going to play the Vraska. That's just kind of all that we have to do that's even remotely proactive. And we'll tick up and draw another land. So might as well play that land out, I suppose. And this push and this decay have been rotting in hand since turn 1. The opponent has shown us no signs of playing to the board. And maybe I should have taken Supreme Verdict as a sign that they're not playing any of the dorks to board. But again, answering Emery is kind of important too. So definitely a balance to be struck. Maybe my inexperience showing through a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and keep ticking Vraska up, and we're going to keep drawing a bunch of garbage, basically. So we do get another Castle Lockthwain activation, and it still yields nothing. We're at least churning through the deck, and we're at least putting Vraska up. But nothing, and the opponent is over there on 7 lands, just one away from Ugin, but not able to slam Ugin quite yet. We draw Nissa Vastwood Seer. So let's float a mana, let's take Vraska up, still digging, still looking for those Thought Seizes, and we don't find anything. So Vraska is now at Alt Threshold. Her -9 is you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. So with the opponent all the way at 26, this is looking like a really, really narrow potential out. So client freezing up on us here a little bit. I believe I'm going to play Grafdigger's Cage this turn. Yes. So we activate Castle Lockthwain yet again, starting to eat a lot of damage from that, right? But we've seen 3 cards off of it. It's been very good. Our life total doesn't seem to matter much right now. And then we play the Cage. So I didn't want to play out the Nissa here because it's just that much softer to Ugin. And of course, we're just hoping to fade the Ugin in general. And Grafdigger's Cage does stop the combo if they top deck an Aetherworks Marvel, and instead they top deck a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot. Not actually a very good draw. They really just wanted an untapped land there, but they don't have one. So it's back to us. It is Vraska ultimate time, and we ult, and that's awesome. But I'm a little bit paranoid here. I'm thinking, okay, they've got to have some kind of removal, some kind of bounce, something here. I'm just going to pass. I'm just going to bluff. And this way, at the very least, we have a stalemate, and we have 2 Quagmires next turn as well. We can't quite activate them both, but we're getting to the point where we can attack with both. And, of course, anything connecting is going to end them. And also, as a floor, we are making it so they cannot play out Ugin, or they are just going to die. However, the opponent chooses to play out Ugin. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe they don't quite realize the OP combo between Vraska and Hissing Quagmire, or maybe they just see the inevitability of what we have, and they want to just force us to see our own win condition. In any case, they're at 32 life. They have 14 energy. They have an Ugin on 9, but none of it matters because we one-shot them with a Hissing Quagmire thanks to Vraska Golgari Queen. It's possible, guys. It's possible I should have attacked last turn. I think, being new to the format, I let myself a little bit in this matchup with my sideboarding, and maybe with that play there as well, be ruled by the other times I played this deck, where they're like killing things with Harnessed Lightning, they're playing to the board, they're playing a lot of instant speed interaction. This is what I've seen. Maybe what I've seen is a little bit outdated. Maybe people are moving toward a more controlling build like this. I don't know. Haven't been able to delve into Pioneer as much as I would have liked, so maybe we were supposed to just go for the throat last turn with Quagmire. But as I said, there were some incentives to hold it back. We did make playing Ugin into a bad play, and before this, that was the one thing we were most afraid of. So anyway, my friends, what a way to win a game, right? We go all the way to turn 12 against a combo deck, and granted, we interacted really well. We Thought Seized twice at very important times. We decayed an Emery. We got an Assassin's Trophy in the mix. We did do a little bit of work on their graveyard, which may or may not have mattered as much as it has in the past when I've played this deck. And then we kind of dudded out. We kind of flooded and drew a bunch of stuff that was not relevant. And we had Vraska just kind of innocently taking up, and then out of nowhere, boom, she ults. Hissing Quagmire connects once. You're done for. So I'm not going to lie, we got lucky there. We got lucky that was a realistic win condition at all. And we got lucky that the opponent did not hit their 8th land for Ugin. until it was a little bit too late to be a good play. So again, variance all over the place in this league, but this time it came down in our favor. So a little bit of a mess, but definitely kind of an historic win. How often do you beat a combo deck by alting Vraska and attacking with a Hissing Quagmire? Even in Pioneer, I have to assume it's pretty rare. So that was a feel-good moment, my friends. And that's going to be the last match that I show you here in a replay form. But I'm going to tell you what happened in the other two matches. And we're going to try to dig up some lists of the types of decks that I played in rounds 4 and 5. All right, my friends, so we had some feel-good moments. It was a little bit feel-bad, I think, to lose to that Artifact aggro deck with the Permission, the heavily blue one. It's a fine deck. It was a fine matchup. It was a fun one, but felt very winnable, and we dropped that. But then the league took a turn south. I did finish 2 and 3. Round 4, we got absolutely destroyed by Greenfield Ramp. The number 3 deck in the meta as of the recording of this video, according to Goldfish. And this is just pure misery for a mid-range archetype like ours, especially a mid-range archetype that does not have access to Fulminator Mage or Liliana of the Veil, two of our better cards in Modern against big mana decks, that even in Modern, it's just not good for us to run into these decks most of the time. So we have all kinds of early ramp. Walking Ballista plays its usual role as something that can be kind of a removal spell or a nuisance early, while also doubling as a game-winning payoff late game. And then, I mean, you've got everything. You've got Golos, who ramps and provides a decent body, and can also actually be activated if a Cascading Cataracts is in play. You've got all the usual BS payoffs that just utterly make mid-range irrelevant, like Ulamog, Emrakul, Ugin, this type of thing. It's, of course, a once-upon-a-time deck. Hour of Promise is pretty scary, tutoring up 2 lands, any 2 lands, so it's heavy ramp, and it tutors up utility, and of course zombies are a prominent feature of the deck with Field of the Dead, which is just another win condition that we are really going to struggle against. So they've got more value out of the side if they needed more against us. Karn Scion of Urza, Thought-Knot Seer, Worldbreaker, all very good against us. Perilous Vault looks like basically the Oblivion Stone of this format, so that's cool too. Just a real matchup, real tough matchup, one that we do not, of course, wish to see. My takeaway from this is that I'm not sure whether it's worth teching against in any way that lowers our percentage significantly against the rest of the field, because it seems pretty far out of our control. You know, we could maybe play like a Virulent Plague to beat Field of the Dead specifically, but even that feels pretty poor because we are just cold to Ulamog, Emrakul, Ugin, plus really going to struggle to battle through their sideboard value pieces. And on top of that, with my build in particular, we have tokens being made, potentially, I think, by just about every Planeswalker. So it's not even like Virulent Plague is one-sided. And then, we're just drawing to like a one-of sideboard card that if they happen to have their Returns to Nature and they can destroy and then still beat us. I don't know. I do not see this matchup as particularly winnable. In other words, I don't think we can really tweak our deck to make this matchup decent. So, yes, we're going to be able to steal games from them. Yes, we're going to be able to steal matches from them. Don't get me wrong. You know, nothing is literally unwinnable, but this was my first time playing it, so let me know if anyone's opinions out there are different. But based on how this one went, I don't really want to tech against it. I just want to, dodge it and pretty much plan to lose if I do run into it. But in any case, my friends, you let me know what your experience with BGX against this Field of the Dead ramp deck is, and let's talk about round 5. So in round 5, we played against Rakdos Aggro, and the list, from what I can tell, of course I didn't see their full 75, but it looked almost exactly like this stock one on Goldfish, and I gotta say, this is a lot more appealing to me as an opponent. This looks like a very winnable matchup, but it does have a couple of cards specifically that are very tough for us to beat. Those two are Hazaret the Fervent and Chandra Torch of Defiance. And as I mentioned, my friends, the bad feels in this league did continue. The games against this deck, I think I won one pretty comfortably, and then the other two went very long. The opponent's curve outs were very good. I think I had to mulligan in both games. I also had to mulligan against Field of the Dead, so again, the league just all fell apart in the latter stages. And nevertheless, after some grueling games, after some really close games, we got the opponent to the state where their board was empty, their hand was empty, and we had like one thing on board. This happened both post-side games, I believe, and they immediately top-decked Hazaret both games. In one game, they top-decked Hazaret, and then right after that, they top-decked Chandra. And we can maybe beat a Hazaret without drawing an answer to it if we already have an overwhelming board and or life total advantage. But if the games were as close as they were, that's just the absolute nut top deck from the opponent, just both times, Again, the second time being Hazaret into Chandra immediately off the top, and they're on like exactly 4 lands. It was just the worst. Just the worst. But I wanted to give you a little bit of taste of that without going through the match because, again, I recognize when content is worth viewing, and then maybe when it's not quite as valuable, as entertaining to view. But the takeaway here is, well, first of all, we should know what the deck looks like, what the deck's all about. I did not see Rampaging Ferocidon in the opponent's deck, but it's only a 2 of. Maybe they just didn't draw it. But I think we're fine overall. Goblin Chain Whirler is pretty poor against my deck and probably against most BGX decks because we're not playing X1s. But you got to be wary about this in the second main phase as a combat trick. Perhaps if they attack with some 1/1s and you block with a 1/2 or something, just something to be aware of. Scrap Heap Scrounger is a card that with Skoos and Deathrite Shaman, we do have the ability to play around, but it leads to an interesting mini game sometimes. Stone Coil Serpent, again, we saw that out of the other artifact aggro decks. Remember that this card exists, and don't assume that your trophies and decays can answer absolutely everything, because not only does Hazaret exist, but this thing has protection from multicolored. Worth noting, of course, Bomat Courier can refuel them, which can be good against us. They've got Wild Slash, Dreadbore, Unlicensed Disintegration. I did see all of these, and the artifacts, the vehicles, the flying vehicles, definitely gives their deck a little bit of evasion, some interesting lines. And sideboard. Oh, the opponent sided in Thoughtseize against me, and I think I had one game where I was flooded, and like turn 4 they went double Thoughtseize and took away my tracker and my Liliana Death's Majesty, something like this, where it just I did not have them read for Thoughtseize whatsoever. Nothing I could have really sequenced differently in the context of the game, but it was just feel-bad moment after feel-bad moment in this matchup. So I do think the matchup is very winnable, but the major takeaway is that we need to be able to beat Hazaret the Fervent, in my opinion. So remember how I said Bile Blight is no longer in the deck, and it has been replaced by Grasp of Darkness. Hazaret is the main reason. I have faltered against Hazaret many a time now. We do have Liliana's Triumph, but that is only one card. Grasp of Darkness being able to take down Hazaret as well. Pretty big game, and of course there are other X4s flying around in the format. This can kill indestructible Gideons that are X4s as well, so Grasp of Darkness is nice, but I did want to review this match even though it went poorly for me this time, because I do think it's winnable as long as we are prepared to beat Hazaret, both in terms of sequencing around the potential appearance of the card as best as we can, and in terms of having the right technology in our 75. So yeah, there it is, the aforementioned Grasp of Darkness. I believe, insult to injury, I also sided in Bile Blight there, which is a fine card in the matchup, but I drew it when they had after they drew the Hazaret. So I think, I try not to be ruled by the outcome of any one match, but Grasp of Darkness is a card that I have been high on for a little while now, and that match was warping enough mentally, that just made me make the change. BioBlight has been a fantastic card as well. Maybe we can play both at some point, but for now I've just cut it for Grasp of Darkness. But anyway, my friends, there you go. That was the only league I've had time to play recently. Again, as I said in the beginning, I have been so busy, and I have more donation leagues piling up. Realistically, I'm not going to have time to play Pioneer in the immediate future, in the next week or so. Hopefully we'll get to it before too long. I certainly plan to. But I wanted to give you this to tide you over, because there was some really cool things to see out of this league, but there was also so much bad variance, so much bad luck, and maybe some incorrect sideboarding for me as well. In one or two spots. I think in the matchups that I just described to you, I sideboarded correctly, but even then, you know, it seems like we were not quite prepared to beat Hazaret, and I don't know if we realistically can be prepared to meet Field of the Dead, but I am always listening to your feedback. So let me know what you think about the list, and let me know what you think about those matchups. One interesting comment that somebody made, it was a great comment. Among other things, they said, in my opinion, this was on my Deck Tech update, in my opinion, once you start hitting 25 lands, which I currently am, you're no longer a mid-range deck, you're a control deck. And you need to have more card selection, more inevitability of the writer didn't say this part, but I would add, of the kind that doesn't really exist in the green-black colors. Now that's a really interesting thought. And I would like to know what you guys think about that. And in other words, a more simplified version of that is 25 lands too much in this deck? But I think the philosophy, the underpinning behind that, you know, the 25 lands putting you into control territory, I think that's a really interesting thought. Now, I think specifically in my build, there's a lot of good incentives for 25 lands. We are playing a 6-drop main deck, so we want to get there. We are playing a lot of cards that really thrive off of lots of land drops. This Value Town package was probably MVP through this league, honestly, and has been MVP in my more casual testing as well. So if we do cut a land, we might need to re-examine Garruk main deck, and then are we really going to play 3 value permanents in the sideboard if we move him there? Probably not, so we need to re-examine either Nissa or Liliana Death's Majesty. We probably would have to cut Nissa Vastwood Seer as well. I don't know if I'd be comfortable playing her in only 24 land deck, but she was pretty awesome at a couple points in this league, so that's kind of the open question right now. And of course, if we are cutting them, what do we bring in? Very, very interesting stuff. My overall perspective right now is that the format's pretty hostile to mid-range, and I do think that Sultai, with some of the powerful blue cards, is pretty much a step up from green and black, as much as it pains me to say. So I don't know if we should be doubling down really, really hard on certain things and trying to just be in a certain niche right now. It's a little bit hard to say. I don't have the time to play enough to really figure it out right now, but I am confident, as I have been for a while, my friends, that as the format clarifies, as more linear decks rise to prominence, assuming they're not ramp decks like the Field of the Dead one, and as a couple more bans start coming down the pipeline, green-black is going to be well positioned in 2, 3, 4 months, half a year, something. We have a lot of really good stuff in this format. We're just probably not quite there. My results have not been the greatest. I think I'm 10-10 in leagues overall. I think I had 1-4-1 and 3 2-3s. My modern win rate is very, very good. So even though that's 50-50, it still feels pretty bad to me. Still doesn't feel like where we want to be, but who knows? It's a small sample size, it's variance, and I am definitely not as good yet as I eventually hope to be in Pioneer. I think that's clear. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. I hope this kind of half league, this replay of the more interesting parts of this league will tide you over until I can play Pioneer next. Do stay tuned to the channel, though, because Modern Elves and Modern Sultai is coming up next. As always, we're going to play some more Modern Rock as well. Maybe we'll dip into some Mono Red again in Modern or in Pioneer. Who knows? I always want to know what you want to see, so let me know. And thank you once again to The Fjord, to Mike DeCamara, to Colin Haskins, to Corey West, and to all other Patreon supporters. It means the world to me. Thank you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I will talk to you soon. Good luck in your games out there, and I hope everybody has a wonderful night.